Have you ever heard that time heals all wounds, yet for some reason, that person keeps living in your head like a fixed thought that won't give you any peace? And the more you try to forget, the more they show up. In your dreams and songs and memories in your feed, between the lines of your life. It doesn't matter if it was just a quick crush or someone who never even noticed you. The presence feels real, almost as if there were an invisible link you can't identify, let alone break. Now let me tell you something nobody talks about. Maybe this has nothing to do with love, fate, or a twin flame. According to Carl Jung, the explanation could lie in the hidden parts of your own mind. Obsessive thoughts aren't a weakness, they're clues. Messages from your unconscious mind trying to show you what you don't yet want or aren't able to see. And once you understand how the unconscious mind works, everything starts to make sense. Today, we'll dive into Carl Jung's fascinating ideas to uncover what lies behind these obsessions that seem unexplainable. We'll talk about Jungian archetypes, Jung's shadow concept, how the unconscious mind works, and how all of this intertwines with the fabric of your emotional life. Maybe, just maybe, that person living in your head is merely a reflection of something much deeper. So, pay attention, because this isn't another cliché love video or empty talk about how to forget someone. Today, we're going deep into Carl Jung's brilliant ideas to finally understand how the unconscious mind works and why certain people seem to have a special magnetism over us. This journey will be enlightening, revealing, and might just change the way you look at these recurring thoughts. Ready to uncover the hidden secrets in the depths of your mind? When someone lives in your head rent-free, rest assured, it's not a coincidence. There's a much deeper reason behind it, and it's hidden in your unconscious. A huge part of the mind you can't easily access, yet which controls much of your emotions, thoughts, and reactions. Carl Jung used to say that if you look outward, you dream, but if you look inward, you awaken. And it's precisely this invitation to introspection that reveals this obsession may be your unconscious, nudging you, showing you an unhealed wound or an unacknowledged desire. Imagine an iceberg. The tip you see above the water is your conscious mind. Now, that massive submerged block is your unconscious. That's where your emotional history, unresolved traumas, deepest desires, and even parts of yourself you've chosen to bury reside. Jung, through depth psychology, dedicated much of his studies to understanding how the unconscious mind works, and why it pushes certain repetitive thoughts on us, like the person you just can't get out of your head. In other words, this obsession may be a signal, as though the unconscious is saying, hey, there's something here you need to see. And it's not necessarily about that person themselves, but about what they awaken inside of you. Through the lens of Jungian archetypes, we realize that recurring figures in our mind can represent internal parts of us that were forgotten, denied, or idealized. Maybe this person symbolizes the courage you wish to develop, or the freedom you feel you're missing. But to understand this better, we need to talk about one of Carl Jung's most powerful ideas, the shadow theory. According to Jung, this is one of the most transformative ideas in depth psychology. Essentially, the shadow represents all that we hide from ourselves: fears, insecurities, desires we deem wrong, repressed impulses. The shadow isn't evil in and of itself, but rather what we reject, because it doesn't fit the image we've built of who we should be. And here's the powerful detail. Often, the person you can't get out of your head represents precisely a part of yourself that you've hidden, but that needs to be seen. You know when you're incredibly impressed by someone's courage, the boldness you swear you'd never have? It could be that deep down you already possess that courage, but it's been buried. Maybe because someone once said, that's not for you. Or maybe that person stirs up your insecurity, your constant comparisons, your sense of inadequacy. And that, too, is the shadow. Jung would say these feelings are mirrors, revealing what hasn't yet been integrated. In other words, it's not just about the other person, it's about you, about aspects of yourself that your unconscious mind is trying to show you, using the other person as a bridge. This is where things start to get intense and liberating as well. If you're willing to observe what that person represents, you can start truly getting to know yourself. And it doesn't require any complicated techniques. A good starting point? Write down, what do I admire or despise in this person? Make a list, analyze it. Look at how those qualities or flaws appear in you, even if subtly. This simple exercise already starts to shine a light on what's hidden in Jung's shadow concept. And trust me, the more light you shed on what's hidden, the freer you become. But to move forward, we need to understand two more inner characters that also live inside you. Within each person, according to Carl Jung, there are two fundamental internal energies: the animus, masculine energy in a woman, and the anima, feminine energy in a man. These forces reside in the unconscious and directly influence how we relate to others. That's why many times, when we fall in love at first sight or feel an unexplainable connection, it may just be our unconscious mind projecting this idealized internal energy onto the other person. It's as if that person embodies a part of us that's dormant, and suddenly, life seems more colorful, more meaningful, more intense. The problem is, This idealized image isn't about who the other person really is, but about who we're seeking internally. Jung would explain that many of these obsessions stem from the deep desire to integrate these polarities within ourselves. For example, if a man is completely enchanted by a woman who is intuitive, mysterious, and sensitive, it could be the anima trying to express itself through her image. A woman who is bewitched by someone strong, logical, and direct might be seeing a face of her animus. Falling in love, then, becomes an invitation to integration, not necessarily a sign the other person is the one. Want a practical way to deal with this? Instead of idealizing the person, stop and ask yourself, what exactly does this person awaken in me? Try to name those qualities. You can jot them down: strength, mystery, freedom, security. Then reflect, how can I develop these qualities in myself? This kind of self-exploration is powerful because you stop placing on the other person the burden of being everything you lack and start becoming more whole. But there's another fundamental detail. What we project onto another, be it love or rejection, often has a lot to do with the famous psychological projection. Projection is when you see in another something that's actually within you. It's as if the unconscious is saying, since you don't want to look at this inside yourself, I'll show it to you on the outside. And guess what? That's where that magical love at first sight, or that sudden dislike for someone you barely know, comes from. Carl Jung saw projection as a defense mechanism, but also as an invitation to awareness. In other words, anytime someone affects you profoundly, for better or worse, it's worth asking yourself, what exactly am I seeing in this person that impacts me so much? Depth psychology explains that projecting isn't a mistake, it's natural. The unconscious mind is constantly trying to bring to light whatever needs healing, recognition, or acceptance. But the problem arises when we believe in the projection wholeheartedly without realizing we're idealizing. You've likely seen it when someone says, he's perfect, after just 2 conversations, or I just didn't like her, without even knowing the person's story. That's how projection creates fantasies that pull us away from reality. And if you're not alert, you can end up in a relationship or an obsession with someone who only exists in your imagination. Want to start changing that? Try the following exercise. When you feel extremely attracted to or bothered by someone, instead of judging or chasing them, write about it. Do a little emotional x-ray. Ask yourself, does this person remind me of someone from the past? What emotion do they awaken in me? What am I expecting from them? This simple exercise helps you separate the real person from the unconscious fantasy. And the more you do it, the more aware you become. Once you start seeing more clearly, life begins showing you answers in very mysterious, sometimes even magical ways. You know when you think of someone and suddenly they message you, or you dream about someone you haven't seen for years, and the next day you cross paths with them. Carl Jung called this synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that can't be explained just by logic. Depth psychology shows us that not everything in the world follows a straight path of logical reasoning. There are movements in the collective unconscious that manifest themselves through these coincidences, as if the universe were trying to send you a message. And sometimes that message is deeper than you think. Synchronicity is like a cosmic whisper, a subtle nudge that says, pay attention. If you keep thinking about someone and that person continues to appear in some way, it might not just be nostalgia. Your unconscious mind may be pointing out a pattern, an unresolved hurt, or even a chance for healing. Jung believed synchronicity was the union of internal events, thoughts and emotions, with external events, happenings and encounters, in a meaningful way. And trust me, when those 2 worlds line up, it's as if a curtain is drawn back to reveal something you needed to see. Next time this happens to you, an unexpected message, a song that perfectly describes what you're feeling, a name that pops up everywhere, take a moment. Instead of brushing it off or calling it a coincidence, ask yourself, what is this trying to show me? It might be a memory, a forgotten feeling, or a choice you're avoiding. The unconscious is creative and mysterious. It doesn't knock, it sneaks in. And sometimes it shows up as someone who seems to reflect something inside you. Speaking of reflection, it's time to look at relationships as mirrors of the soul. Every relationship is a mirror. Sometimes it's a clean mirror that shows our glow, our strength, our ability to love. Other times it's a foggy mirror that reveals our insecurities, jealousy, and unmet needs. Carl Jung said that what we see in others, especially what affects us most, says far more about us than about the other person. The unconscious mind uses these human connections as a route to self-knowledge. It's as if every person who crosses your path carries a piece of your inner puzzle, and the more you observe these interactions, the more you discover about yourself. Here's a straightforward, real-life example. You meet someone who makes you feel inferior. It might be a coworker, a friend of your partner, or someone you barely know. Your first reaction is to think, they're making me feel small. But the Jungian mirror invites you to ask, what in me is feeling inferior? That's the power of depth psychology, shifting focus from external judgment to internal awareness. It might be that this person is activating an old wound of rejection, comparison, or not belonging. And that's where even a brief interaction can become a portal for your personal growth. The practice here is simple yet powerful. Whenever someone provokes a strong emotional reaction in you, be it anger, passion, sadness, or excitement, ask yourself honestly, what is this person reflecting in me? Maybe they're revealing your dormant strength, your need to set boundaries, or your desire to be freer. This kind of self-inquiry is one of the most effective paths to emotional intelligence. And in the digital age, this mirror isn't found only in face-to-face encounters. It often appears on the phone screen, in the profiles you follow, in the silent obsessions you keep. Have you ever stopped to wonder why you follow certain profiles on social media? Why you go back, almost without noticing, to see if that person has posted something new? Depth psychology helps us understand that it's not just a habit or curiosity. Many times it's the collective unconscious at work in the digital world. Carl Jung never lived in the Instagram era, but his teachings transcend time and remain relevant. When you find yourself stalking someone who isn't even part of your life, maybe you're searching there for something missing in yourself. A trait you admire, a repressed desire, an identity you wish you could live. Algorithms are smart, yes, but your unconscious mind is even smarter. The content that attracts you most has to do with what's active within you, even if you're not aware of it. Profiles of free-spirited, bold, creative people. Maybe you wish you lived more authentically. People who are successful and flaunt a life of luxury. Perhaps you're projecting a desire for validation or security. Carl Jung taught us that when we don't recognize something in ourselves, we tend to seek it outside. And on social media, this process happens intensely and quietly. So here's a practical challenge. Next time you're scrolling through your feed, pause for a moment and observe. Which profiles most attract you? What do you feel when you see these people? Envy, inspiration, emptiness, fascination? Jot those sensations down and reflect, what am I looking for in myself through them? That simple act of awareness is already a step toward integrating Jung's concept of the shadow. Because it's not about quitting social media, it's about using it consciously. And consciousness is the first step toward emotional resilience, which is essential for dealing with everything the external world stirs up inside us. Running away from the shadow weakens us. Facing it makes us stronger. Carl Jung argued that true emotional freedom is born when we stop projecting who we are and start integrating all the parts that exist within us, even the parts we're not too fond of. You know when you can't handle criticism or feel overwhelming pain at a rejection that seems out of proportion? Those are clear signs something in the shadow is demanding attention. Jung teaches that emotional growth doesn't come from running away or taking control. It comes from bravely accepting what resides inside us. Imagine a person who gets frustrated whenever they aren't acknowledged. They could blame the world for not seeing them, or they could ask why that need for validation weighs so heavily. Perhaps, deep down, there's a part of them that never felt enough. Integrating Jung's shadow is exactly that. Welcoming your internal wounds, recognizing the emotional root of your triggers, and learning to handle them without spiraling. It requires courage, but brings an indescribable personal power. A power no longer dependent on others, but born of genuine, profound self-knowledge. No masks. Want to begin this process? Instead of running from emotional discomfort, embrace it with curiosity. When something bothers you, ask yourself, what is this teaching me about me? Keep a journal about it. Write down, unfiltered, what you feel. Check out books like The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle or The Red Book by Carl Jung if you want to dive deeper. Shadow integration is what builds the foundation for your emotional resilience. And with this strong foundation, even your life choices start to change. You stop acting on autopilot and begin making decisions more consciously and authentically. When you truly get to know yourself, your choices change. You stop living on autopilot, driven by traumas, insecurities, and patterns inherited from the unconscious, and start acting from your essence. Jung addressed this when distinguishing the persona, the social mask we use to adapt to the world, from our true individuality. Decisions made by the persona are often based on fear. Fear of messing up, displeasing others, or not being accepted. Conscious choices come from a deeper place, your inner truth, where your most authentic self resides. Want to see how this applies day to day? Someone might choose a stable job they loathe because they learned success equals stability. Another might enter a relationship just to avoid loneliness, even knowing there's no real connection. Though these decisions seem rational, they're often driven by unconscious parts that have never been questioned. Jung's shadow concept influences even our desires. That's why, before making any big decisions, it's worth asking, am I choosing out of fear or in alignment with who I really am? The practice of self-observation is what gives you back the power to choose consciously. For every decision, big or small, take a moment. Breathe. Question yourself. Write down how you feel, what you fear, what you truly desire. If you want to go deeper, experiment with practices like guided meditation, family constellation work, or read books like Man and His Symbols by Carl Jung. Over time, you realize living consciously isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. And it's precisely this wholeness that Jung called individuation. Individuation, according to Carl Jung, is the deepest, most liberating process a human being can undergo. It's the path to becoming who you really are, not who others expect you to be, not who you try to be to please people, but who you were born to be. It doesn't mean becoming perfect, but becoming whole, uniting light and shadow, integrating the conscious and the unconscious, acknowledging both your strengths and vulnerabilities without hiding from them. Jung saw individuation as an inner rebirth, a reunion with your own soul beyond masks, roles, and labels. This process can begin with small, everyday things, admitting you like silence when everyone else loves parties, owning that you prefer creating to competing, or recognizing you feel fear without being ashamed of it. Each step you take in that direction brings you closer to your center. The collective unconscious often pushes us to follow standards like success, beauty, fame. But individuation doesn't want you to follow the standard. It wants you to follow your essence. And believe me, when you start living in alignment, you feel a sense of lightness, clarity, and quiet inner strength. Are there inspiring examples? Countless. People who changed careers at 40, who finally embraced a hidden artistic talent, who left abusive relationships to reclaim their own voice. Individuation transforms your life because it doesn't ask you to fit in, it invites you to express yourself. And when that happens, even those obsessive thoughts about someone lose their power. Because you begin to see that maybe that person was just your soul's call to rediscover yourself. And that's why, to wrap up this deep dive, we need to recap everything that's now revealing itself in you. If someone lives in your mind, it might not be just longing, neediness, or coincidence. Maybe it's your soul trying to talk to you. Through depth psychology, Carl Jung showed us that these persistent thoughts can be symbolic messages from the unconscious, revealing aspects of us that need to be seen, healed, or integrated. The person you can't stop thinking about might be a mirror, a shadow, or a projection, but above all, they might be a gateway to yourself. And the more awareness you gain, the less you become a hostage to these repetitive cycles. Now, this path of self-exploration is ongoing, and it starts with small yet profound steps. A journal, for instance, can show you hidden truths with just paper and pen. Meditation, even for 10 minutes, quiets the noisy mind and connects you with your center. Therapy with the right professional opens doors you never knew existed. It's not about changing overnight. It's about starting to see with new eyes. When you understand how the unconscious mind works, everything changes. Your relationships, your decisions, and especially your inner peace. So, have you ever asked yourself what this person actually represents inside you? Could they be an invitation for you to express yourself more? Or maybe a reminder of something you buried long ago? The key isn't to get rid of the thought, but to understand what it's trying to show you. And if this video has brought you this far, it's because you're ready to look inward with greater courage, depth, and clarity. Now tell me, after all this, do you still think that obsession is just longing or neediness? Or might it be the push you needed to dive into yourself? Because the truth is simple. Nobody occupies your mind for nothing. The unconscious mind knows what it's doing. And if you've made it here, it's because you're ready to take the most powerful step of your life, leaving autopilot behind and starting to live with awareness. If this video moved you in any way, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a like here, not just to support the channel, but to tell your unconscious, I'm ready to look within. Oh, and feel free to comment below, who is the person you simply can't get out of your head? And what do you think they represent within you? Maybe just by writing it out, you'll already start seeing something new about yourself. And look, if this content made you think, feel, or remember, you might be at the beginning of a journey that will transform the way you live, love, and make decisions. Here on the channel, there are other videos that will broaden your view even more, like the episode about shadow work or the one explaining Carl Jung's archetypes. Click on them after you finish this one. And if you want to continue on this path of deep self-knowledge, spirituality, and awareness, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications so you won't miss any new piece of this puzzle that is you. Because if this video stirred something in you, maybe it's life telling you it's time to look inward.